Welcome everyone to another episode of Inside Star Citizen, our weekly look at the behind-the-scenes development of what my mother calls that video game Jared's making whenever she explains it to her friends. It's Q3, and if you've been following this show in any of its incarnations for a while now, you know that the road to CitizenCon is a very interesting one for our weekly video content, as we skillfully avoid all the hot topics being saved for the big, now 2-day event, and use that challenge as an opportunity to explore aspects of our development that might otherwise never get a chance to shine. It's an opportunity this quarter to look at how Rastar is being used to remaster existing UGFs in Alpha 320, to explore racing a little bit, and a new ship that readers of Jump Point magazine and our social media channels probably already know is on its way. An update to Claudius and how it's being used to create even more immersive environments heading your way, and then a spin around the whole VFX department to see what they're up to. Yes, Virginia, it's true, there will be fire. We can do all this and more as we navigate our journey to the big 2 days in October. But up this week, and my reason for sitting here at my desk, dumping just a little bit of SCL into our ISC, is to talk to Torsten and Jacob from the EUPU feature team about the prototyping process, how they test design and programming implementations at the earliest stages, and how it relates to Munching, an important component of Salvage, and my nightly routine just 20 minutes before I go to sleep. Torsten, Jacob, how you doing, people?
Doing good.
I am fine, thank you.
All right, so we are here talking about prototyping process. Before we get into it, give me the top level, just the LinkedIn version answer. What is a prototype and why do we do it?
A prototype basically can have several facets in game development, and for us particular, it is always about gameplay, and in this particular case, it is about the technical problems that we might face and we might have to solve. So for that, we always use prototypes, and playtesting those prototypes is a crucial part in game development, where it is mainly used to prove theories, where the theory is either gameplay is fun, does it technically work, and this is basically what the purpose of a prototype is.
Anything you want to add, Jacob?
From more of a dev perspective, we tend to take what the designer's vision is for gameplay, and then we've got to figure out how can we achieve that in the game, and just as often that's not crystal clear from the start, so we have to try a few things and see what technical hurdles might be ahead of us that we're going to have to consider for the full development.
So what we're going to do on this week's show, the first of our Q3 shows where things are a little bit different, we are going to look at a feature at the absolutely earliest stage. This is earlier than we've ever shown any feature ever, the prototype phase. What we're about to show you is not going to look good. It's not going to look pretty. It's going to be weird, poppy, and buggy. So we're just warning you ahead before you take the footage and put it in your YouTube videos. What is the prototype that we're going to look at right now, Jacob?
We're going to be looking at the prototype for Munching, the next tier of Salvage. The idea being we need some way to take apart a larger ship and break it into little pieces so that you can then pick it up in your salvage ships, gain some material from that, and you'll be able to sell that later. But we're going to be looking at just the breaking a ship apart phase, which is what we're prototyping here.
All right, so I got it queued up here. Let's take a look at this here. So obviously this is a vulture approaching a gladius.
Yep. So for the prototype, we've added in a new munching mode, sub-mode to Salvage. So all of that hull scraping UI's disappeared. And we're going down to just what we need for this prototype, which is the ability to break apart a ship, which at the moment is going to look exactly the same as if you blew it up with your guns, but in future that would look rather different.
What's happening right here? I see the bar filling up on the left, but nothing's happening with the ship.
Yeah, so this is the placeholder for the actual gameplay that would happen here. The design will have some actual gameplay for what you have to do as a player to break the ship apart, but we put in that little placeholder, which is just essentially a timer, a progress bar, based on how big the target is.
And that is actually on purpose, because the question that we are asking in this prototype are more technical that means that we shouldn't focus on the gameplay aspect, so we should keep the gameplay as minimal or as simple as possible, and then so that we can fully focus on the technical bits of the prototype.
Okay, so we saw it broken into some, what looked like normal debris, but now we got to break it into smaller munchable stuff. So we'll go back to the video here.
So breaking it into normal debris is stuff that you've seen before, but when we have this bigger part, it doesn't come apart into more pieces naturally. So in this prototype, we are just deleting the thing and replacing it with loads of tiny little placeholder pieces to act as the munched apart debris. What you're also seeing is a prototype for how you will get those pieces into your cargo, which is a little suction field that grabs those little pieces, drags them towards the grinder in the mouth of the Vulture, and from there they're converted into cargo. Those
little pieces that we saw are obviously not arted and everything. I want to remind people again, we've literally never shown anything in a prototype phase before, so forgive me for reiterating this 2 or 3 more times before we're done here. This is designer art, just small pieces to represent the mass and the size of stuff that we might be using.
It's even worse, it's coda art.
Yes, indeed. This is the programmer equivalent of a white box test, where I'm not even qualified to make white boxes, so I just rip off other assets that I found in the engine and just slap them together. So that's what this is.
And obviously, without being a prototype, there's no VFX, there's no explosions, there's no beams, there's none of the things that would mask this transition that would normally happen, so that you don't see the pieces just pop in, like they're currently doing.
Yes.
All right, so that was done on your local machine, just you on your workstation doing a local version of the universe here. The next phase, as I understand it, is to test it in PU conditions, and we're going to go ahead and start this video because this video is going to go for a little bit. Tell me what we're doing here.
Yeah, so I'll tell you what we're doing, and then we can discuss later why we're doing that.
Exactly.
What we're doing right here is I want to test worst case performance conditions. So I'm chucking in some console commands to load up or stream in several different landing zones at the same time. Because otherwise, me as just one player on the server, I wouldn't really be loading that much. I wouldn't be stressing the server. So I'm going to stress it quite a lot by loading up as many landing zones as I can think of off the top of my head, basically, until I see that server FPS count go appreciably lower. And then only once I've done that am I going to step into the actual gameplay test.
I also noticed you've upgraded from a Gladius to an 890 jump.
Yes, because when I think worst case for breaking a big thing into small things, I want the biggest possible thing, which is going to require lots and lots of small things. So, yeah, 890 jump is a good candidate for that.
Okay. So, what are you typing here? Oh, yeah.
I'm just typing in some comments for the other recipients of this video, because this was an internal video for, reviewing stuff.
Do you often use console commands to leave notes for people?
There are other ways, but it's the most convenient. So,
all right. So we've got the server simulating PU conditions. All the landing zones are loaded at once instead of streaming in and out like they would normally would.
Yes.
So it's actually worse than you would see on a normal PU.
Indeed, and we're going to see that immediately, that this breaking the ship apart that we saw work so nicely in the editor, well, I've really annoyed the server here, because all of these pieces are popping in a not so great way, and I make a bit of a sarcastic comment about it in the console.
It's important to create these conditions, to test these things, not just in ideal conditions, not just the ideal universe of your own computer, or even the PU when it's like first loads and nobody's in and everything's great.
No, indeed. What I'm testing here is worse than we would hope it ever to be. We don't want it to ever be this bad, but we got to test it because it might be.
All right, so here's where beams would be shooting out, starting to break the ship apart.
Yeah, there'd be extra gameplay here, there'd be VFX or whatever, but in the editor version, we saw pretty much as soon as the big piece disappeared, all those tiny little bits turned up. Well, it's not going to go that way in this situation. we're going to be waiting quite some time for all those little pieces to turn up.
Gotcha. And so while we're waiting for those pieces to turn up here, let's talk about what we learned from what we've learned from these tests so far. Obviously, there's some performance stuff, but there's also some gameplay implications from what we've seen. Torsten, you want to talk us through it?
Well, I can talk about some parts that we learned from, right?
Sure.
So the best thing that you can learn from a prototype is actually everything that goes bad, because this is the stuff that you can then iterate on and make the gameplay or the technical stuff even better. So from the gameplay perspective, so I will just talk about the gameplay stuff, and Jacob can talk about what we learned from a technical perspective there. Is from the gameplay we learned that what about big ships? So how, for example, now you saw the Vulture trying to attach to the 890 jump. That is a bit of a wonky situation and it doesn't feel right. So what about Vultures actually munching bigger ships? So how can we make that an interesting gameplay? Then you saw in the first video what happens when the ship transitions into the smaller bits. So the masking is a huge topic that we have to solve so that it feels right and you don't notice that one element pops away and another element pops in. So we definitely have to mask that. Then what you might have seen in the first part is the conversion of materials. I don't know if you paid attention to the filler station bar that basically fills the SCU crates in the backside of the Vulture, but that filled drastically faster than it would normally do with hull scraping. That means that it would be more painful for you to munch because you have to stand up from your seat more often, go down to the filler station, remove the boxes. So this is definitely an issue that we then have to solve, because we really don't want to have this gameplay to be more tedious than it has to be. So we have to find a solution how we can make it more like much nicer for the player to actually remove those crates there. Then the navigation around the pieces is also something that we notice isn't that fun. So we will probably utilize the tractor beams there because we are anyway working on them. But maybe that makes it much easier for players instead of flying around and getting the pieces between the fork of the Vulture and then having it disintegrate, but instead you pulling the pieces in with a tractor beam. The fork of the Vulture is very limiting in terms of what pieces will fit. So this is also something we learned. And a big thing is, which already is standing out, is how can we make it fun and unique for the Reclaimer. So we just were looking in the prototype at the Vulture, and the big question that our team was asking in the end of that prototype was like, okay, how can we facilitate the claw and the uniqueness visuals, or the uniqueness in general of the Reclaimer, to actually facilitate that gameplay and have it stand out and be meaningful and fun.
All right, so a lot of gameplay, gameplay implications from just that little prototype. Jacob, what was your takeaways?
From the tech perspective, I'm looking at things like the performance and also just what am I going to have to account for to achieve the designer's vision here? And I know that we're going to want things like the time that it takes to destroy something to be somewhat proportional for its size and mass. But from the initial prototype, I could already see that a bigger piece taking longer. It already takes a few seconds with the Gladius. If we're going to scale that up and scale up the time as well proportionally to a big target, we're going to have to think about what equation are we going to use for scaling that, so that it doesn't take you ages, like sitting there for minutes to break something apart. I got to think about how I'm going to hook in the visual effects and the audio. What dependencies am I going to need to get involved?
Speaking of judging time, the entity system is taking a little bit of time to spawn all the spawn debris. We've been talking. This is still going at the moment. Obviously, there's going to have to be some optimization work there with the entity system.
This is kind of what we've got with PES is that It's not quite as quick to create entities as before we had PES. And we have all sorts of great stuff that comes with PES. So this is just a small limitation that we have to learn to work around. But it tells us that gameplay ideas that we had before PES might need some adaptation in order to work efficiently in the post-PES world.
So speaking of which, let's go back to the video. I think we're about to get the entity spawns now. Any second, this has been playing in the background while we've been talking.
Here any moment now, yes.
There we go.
There we go. And a bit of a flicker as they come in, but they're finally here. So, yeah, this tells us, well, in this worst case scenario, this performance is obviously unacceptable. We're going to have to do something about this. So we're thinking about how can we change our approach? How can we optimize what we've got? Discussions in various different directions. But this is a key takeaway from this prototype, because if it had gone differently, if we tried this and the pieces turned up in just a few seconds or so, then we'd have known that this approach on the whole was probably acceptable, and with a little bit of optimization, it'd work. But that's not what happened. The stuff took minutes to arrive, and that means we have to do some more serious rethinking about how we're going to approach this.
The vision and the basically the acceptance criteria our directors define, they are still untouched, right? So those are still to be fulfilled, and even the overall vision that we as the team defined for how that gameplay should play out, those will be like, those are already set in stone because we all agreed on those. But how the actual gameplay then plays and feels, this is still affected by the prototype. A prototype like this is really perfect for stepping in early and making sure that every tick box on our acceptance criteria is met, and we can make a better gameplay out of it.
I think we all have a real desire and responsibility towards testing these things as often and as early and under as much duress as possible as we work to stabilize the PU and make it a more enjoyable experience going forward. So Torsten, Jacob, thank you for hanging out with us today.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
So what did we learn this week? Well, we learned that prototyping doesn't really look like much of anything, but it's an essential step towards proving out design and performance before all the artists and other devs go in to do their thing. That it's just as important to prove out good ideas and good paths to take as it is to encourage developers to seek out another way towards success. And that it's important to continue refining not just the features and content being made, but the very way that we test those things, earlier and earlier, and under a scale of duress. For Inside Star Citizen, I'm Jared Huckabee. Thank you for letting us share the process of game development with you, and we'll see you all here next week.